Okay, for chapters 42 through 67, I'm going to recap as I am reading, so let's start with what I've read so far. First off, Bryce and Hunt go and meet a mer named Therian Ketos. He's got like this tiger print all up from his tail up to his body, even onto his body. Super attractive as most veneer are. Bryce is like ogling his abs. He's a huge flirt, so he's flirting back. Hunt is getting jealous, not loving what it's doing to him as he's watching Therian be his normal self, and Therian calls Bryce legs. Basically, they ask Therian if he's seen anything or like heard anything. It could be suspicious as he is their House of Many Waters contact, because Therian is the River Queen's captain of intelligence. So Hunt thought they'd ask if, he's heard or seen anything. He worked with Therian once on a previous case that involved a serial killer, and one of the victims was unfortunately Therian's sister. So Hunt and Therian are familiar with each other, and Therian hasn't heard anything, but he says he'll, do some digging and let them know. Afterwards, Bryce and Hunt decide they need to go question Sabine in person, and they need to see if she lies to them about things that they do know. So they go to Moonwood, and they go to the Wolf's Den to question Sabine. They say they're there to talk to the Prime, but they specifically go at a time that they know the Prime, it won't be available. So Sabine is like the second would show up. So they do. Unfortunately for Bryce, the wolf pack that's kind of like on guard duty at the gate for the wolves den is Amelie Ravenscroft. She is the leader of the pack that belongs to Ethan Holstrom, who's Connor's little brother and Bryce's former best friend until everything went down with the pack. And he left her like a lot of messages that basically he was like, you're not invited to the sailing, you're not welcome. It was rough. Connor pretty much raised Ethan after their parents died, so he was really, really close with his brother. So he took Connor's death especially hard. And then also Bryce's phone, we learned in the weeks after the whole murder thing happened, her phone got hacked and all the messages were leaked. So then she was brutally made fun of. Actually, most of the time, still, it's like 2 years later, and she still gets made fun of and everything for all of her horrible drunk messages, which is why Ethan and the rest of the wolves all hate her. I mean, Sabine already hated her, but now all the rest of them hate her because Amelie had a crush on Connor, and then obviously Ethan loved Connor, and he had been shipping Bryce and Connor for a long time, and then to wolves, loyalty is like really important, and the minute Bryce agreed to go on a date with Connor, that was like as good as mated for them. And so then her hooking up with somebody in the bathroom while she was drunk was very frowned upon by these wolves. So they all think that she's trash and they call her trash. And so they're like really saying some rude things. And Hunt is like, yo, guys, we're just here to talk to the Prime. Like, calm down. And they're not taking it easy on Bryce. And she's immediately like, this was a horrible idea. It shouldn't have come. And it's not a great start to then talking with Sabine. They only ask Sabine like 2 or 3 questions, and then she does lie because she says she doesn't know where. She lies and says that she didn't know where Danica had been stationed, or that Danica hadn't been stationed like right at the temple or something. Whatever it was, she directly lies about the question, but Bryce is just so upset and triggered about everything that the other wolves and Sabine and everyone has said that she like can't handle it. So she's like, this was a mistake, and just leaves. And walks right out as everyone's still calling her trash and everything. And so then Hunt catches up to Bryce and is like, hey, I didn't realize like things were so bad, like this is horrible. And she's like, yeah, well, people are a-holes, like they just suck. And like, I'm sure you heard that my messages had leaked back then. He's like, I mean, like I vaguely remember that, yeah. And she was like, well, yeah, so people just suck. They like made a song called I Hooked Up With Someone in the Bathroom, Don't Tell Connor, and they would like sing it to her all the time, and it's obviously not a flattering song. So she had to delete like all of her social presence and just avoid people. And so that's what she's been doing the last 2 years. We also learn in like kind of a flashback from Bryce's side that winter after Danica and the pack had died, somebody had like sent thousands of printed versions of the lyrics of that song that whoever made up. So then she went to her roof to go burn them, because that's just what you would do with 1,000 pages of a horrible, mean song. And instead, she got to the top and then considered walking right off the roof because it was a really low point in her life. And then Juniper calls her, asks if she's doing anything, Bryce said no, and Juniper, like, could tell something was wrong from her voice, so she just talked for the whole time on the phone, kept Bryce talking, and then she immediately showed up at her apartment building and then went to the roof with her, helped her burn the letters, and then she didn't leave Bryce's side for 3 days. And Bryce was like, I don't know if Juniper knows this, but she saved my life that day. So we get that interaction between them. After this whole scenario goes down, Juniper is on the phone with Bryce, maybe like a day or so later, and she's talking about, you know, her dance and whatnot, because it's kind of her career, and she's like really good at this. And she talks about how her instructor is opening up like a class to the general public, and Bryce should do it. It's like 2 times a week, because Bryce, again, hasn't danced in 2 years, even though she loves it. And Bryce is like, your instructor is like the hardest, that would be like the hardest class to get into. Like, I wouldn't have a shot. Juniper's like, that's why I saved you a spot. So all you have to do is show up. And Bryce is like, you know, I don't know. And she's like, Juniper's like, come on. Like, you know that you love it. You can do it. It's just 2 times a week, 2 hours. Like, I saved, it's not every day that I can save you a spot for this. Like, I need you to actually consider. So she's like, I'll think about it. Kind of non-committal, but she at least says she'll think about it. Later on, Hunt is thinking about the whole situation that happened at the wolves den, and he's like, man, even in death, like, Bryce is here standing up for Danica, and even after all these people are like harassing her and everything, she still stands up for anyone who tries to tarnish Danica's image or whatever. So he's like, man, what must it be like to have friends like that? No idea. So then Isaiah asks Hunt if he wants to go to the bar with the rest of the Triari, which he asks and has been asking for the last like 4 years, and knows that Hunt always will say no, but he invites him anyway. But this time Hunt says yes. So he ends up going to the bar with the Triari, and it's like his first time going out with them. Although they don't go to a normal angel bar because they're the Fallen, so it's kind of frowned upon. So they go to a different, like, normal lower bar, I guess. Angel bars are like higher up on the streets or something. So anyway, that happens. Bryce is then alone in her apartment, and she's really feeling like the solitude, and she hates the silence. She reflects how that's why she like puts TV on to drown out the silence. Hasn't even had time in the last 2 years to like sit down and read a good book, because like she doesn't want to let herself be able to think. She needs the noise to drown out stuff, and all she has is Syrinx, and so Juniper's like, I can't hang out tonight because I got more dance practice if I want to get better or whatever. And so her single friend, just Juniper, is busy, so then Bryce has nobody. Hunt's gone, Juniper's busy, Fury still doesn't answer any of her messages. They go straight to voicemail. So Bryce is like, man, I have nobody. And she had promised Hunt that while he was gone, she would not leave the apartment, but the silence gets to her. So she's like, you know what, I need to leave anyway. So she locks Syrinx up in his cage, and then she starts walking out. And Naomi was watching her for Hunt, and so he gets a call, and he knows exactly what it is. He's like, where'd she go? And Naomi's like, she's walking over this direction. So he flies over there, lands, can tell that she's not in a good headspace. So he's just kind of like, hey, why did you leave? And she's like, well, are you gonna start yelling at me? But like, she's not even in a good mood to tease him. She's just like such a monotone voice, like, are you gonna yell at me? And he's like, well, not until I have like maybe a good reason to yell. Why did you leave? And she's like, I just, like, nothing matters essentially. And so then he faces her and he's like, hey, you know, you good? And then they're kind of getting a little close, and there's been a little bit of some sexual tension building between these two over the last, you know, few days, something or other. And then the moment is ruined by Hunt getting bit by a Crystallos. Literally comes out from the bushes behind them and just bites him. And then everything obviously goes, like, crap hits the fan after that. And so then his powers get nullified by like this venom, this clear venom of the Crystallos. And so they're fighting it, and he's punching it, and he tells Bryce to run, and she obviously doesn't listen. And then she grabs his gun, shoots, misses because it moves, and then she takes a second to kind of restudy herself, aims, shoots the thing in the head, gone. And then Hunt takes out like a sword or knife or something, and then he hacks the head off and hacks it into pieces, so it's like really dead. This is in a public area, mind you, like shopping area, so there's a lot of people that saw, and a lot of people screamed and ran. Naomi lands, and the rest of the Triari show up pretty quick, and they're like, holy crap, what happened? Like, trying to figure out everything that happened. And Hunt gets a med witch to look at like his wounds, because obviously he's not in good shape, and if his powers are nullified, I don't know if that interferes with any healing powers Veneer have, but probably does. So then the med witch is putting these like leeches onto like his cuts to like suck out those venom, and then she can also study it later is what she says. And she doesn't use the first light. First light is when people make the drop and they like descend into their power and then like really hit their max power for whatever the drop is. That power is called first light, and so that's what like powers everything in, I think, in Midgard, honestly. So usually the first go-to is first light's got some pretty good healing properties, so most med witches will just give you a bunch of first light as like a bandage to, and then they'll use their powers second. But this witch, she's like immediately using her powers, like she prefers to be healing manually basically instead of using the go-to fix, even though she has some vials of first light in her bag, as Bryce sees. And then Naomi's like trying to get Bryce to also get inspected by the med witch. She's like, no, I'm good. And Naomi's like, dude, if Hunt can have the med witch look at you, then obviously you can have the med witch look at you. But then right at that moment, Micah lands, and there's like a hole. Everyone can feel the power as he lands, and he is not happy. So he gets the info on what happened, and he's pissed, and he's like, why did it attack you, go for you, Hunt? And he's like, I don't know, but it nullified my powers, and it was crazy. And then Micah's like, I need no press, no evidence of this, because Sandriel's literally here. So he's like, I need no evidence. And so he just touches the Crystallis' body and then burns it up into just ashes. It's just a pile of ash now. And they're like, we needed that for evidence. He's like, no, I need no evidence of this. So then that happens. And then Hunt is like good enough. So he grabs Bryce, and then they fly home because that was a crazy ordeal. And they need to be safe. And they think that it's Sabine that had just set the Crystallis on them after they just questioned her. So they're like, this is insane. We need to go back to our safety. They get back to their apartment. When they land on the roof, it starts raining. Hunt hugs Bryce and is just kind of like, are you okay? Like, we should probably go inside because it's raining. She's like, yeah, probably should. They don't. They just stand there hugging, getting closer. Sexual tension is building. But then, unfortunately, the moment is ruined again by Sabine walking, kind of breaking through the door to the apartment really fast, holding a gun right towards Bryce's heart. And then Hunt pulls out a gun right towards Sabine's head, but they're kind of like in a little truce, stalemate. And then Sabine is like pissed that they had come, they had shown up. So she was laying into them about like, how dare you, you need to stay out of this case, like you're gonna ruin everything that Danica stood for, you're trash, blah, blah, blah. All of these horrible things. Bryce gets a little pissed, so she's like, you killed your daughter, blah, blah, all this stuff. And she's like, you think that I killed my daughter? Like, why would I do that? I was trying to protect her. I protected her, and I covered her mistakes all the time. So I literally, she's like, yeah, I did swap out that footage, but that's because Danica's the one that stole the horn. And so I'm just covering her mistakes like I've always been. So, like, why would I ever kill her? She's just like, stay out of this case, because I've been trying really hard to keep Danica's image, good, and you're just gonna ruin it. You're just gonna mess it up if you keep looking into this. And then she turns into her wolf form and then leaps off the building, and it's fine. So then they finally go inside. Bryce is then in a horrible mood for 5 days straight. Hardly eats, she just wakes up, goes to work, comes home, and goes to bed. And Hunt is like really concerned. So Hunt is getting concerned because it's been 5 days and they haven't done anything to investigate, and they have hardly spoken, and he's seen Bryce eat hardly anything for these full 5 days, so he's worried about her, and they've made no progress on the case. And then on day 5, they're at work. Well, they're at Griffin Antiquities. Bryce is working, sort of, going through the motions, and Hunt is trying to continue helping finding leads for the case. Rune shows up with updates from the Medwitch and to check in on Bryce, see how she's doing. He has a theory that there's this, she has a theory that there's this new healing drug that's out on the market that's synthetic magic, so it's like a mix of magic and organic stuff and human stuff and whatever, science. It's synthetic magic that could possibly heal the horn, so that would fit the light that's not light, magic that's not magic kind of description, because that's what like a synthetic drug is. We also get on page 458, mark that for yourselves if you've read ACOTAR, very interesting detail here. he explains his star sword because Bryce is like, can't you use your sword? Or Hunt or someone's like, can't you use your sword to like find the horn with this star sword power? Or I mean, with this starborn power. And Rune's like, outside of it choosing you and then also just being a fun party trick, it doesn't do anything without the knife. And Hunt's like, what do you mean the knife? And he's like, well, let me explain to you. Basically, pulls out the sword. It's pretty dope looking. There's a nice little starlight thing that it runs all the way down it, which is the party trick part. And he's like, essentially, this was a set. There was a knife that belonged with it and a sword that belonged with it together. They could do lots of cool magic-y things. However, at some point, the knife was lost, and it's like we don't have any record of even when or where it would have been lost. So it's been missing for like 15,000 years, so unknown. It's just a cool sword, basically. So they're like, bummer. Okay, guess that's all we get there. Then Tharian sends over an otter with a note to Bryce that basically has evidence of more Crystallos bodies that were found that had been dumped into the river and eventually made their way down into the waters. And so then Bryce is looking at these nasty pictures and she puts together that Danica and the pack, they weren't killed by a Crystallos. Their wounds are different. Like every victim that they find, its internal organs have been like eaten, and then there's also a lot of evidence of the Crystallos venom in their blood. So like their magic has been negated, whatever, and none of that was found in Danica or the pack. So she's like, what if there's something else? It's not the Crystallos that's killed them, because it's not leaving its victims in piles. Like, I know what I saw, and that doesn't match. So now they're kind of back to square one. So then she's like, you know what? We could ask somebody. I have someone we could ask on how to determine who killed Danica and like how she actually died. So she tells Hunt, she's like, don't go ballistic on me. She ends up using her obsidian salt, which was not just purely for a fun adventure. She's been saving it. Sets up 2 circles in her living room, and Hunt is like, it's a horrible idea to summon a demon. You better not be summoning the Crystallos. And she's like, no, I'm not. I'm not summoning a Crystallos, don't you worry. So then, as the summoning spell's working, however blah blah magic works, Hunt is horrified to see it is not a demon, it is a prince of hell. Literally one of these 7 princes of hell, H-E-L, shows up, and not only that, it is the 5th prince of hell. The 7th is the worst. He's the Star Eater. He's the only known living creature to have ever killed one of the Asteri. There's 7 Asteri that rule all of Midgard. Only 6 are alive, because back in like the First Wars or some ancient time, the Star Eater managed to kill one of the Asteri. That's the Star Eater. Number 7, worst prince. 6 is just a teeny little bit better than him, I guess. And this is the 5th. The Prince of the Chasm, Adis. He shows up. And he looks at Bryce, he's like, oh, nice to see you, Bryce Quinlan. And then Hunt's like, what do you mean? You know her name and that you, like, seem familiar. And so he's freaking out. He basically tells them, because Bryce is like, hey, we know that you guys are trying to get back into our realm with all this stuff. And he's like, I haven't heard anything about that. And, you know, despite what you guys think, I don't know about the goings-on of every single demon from hell and what they do, where they leave, you know, all that. So he's like, I promise you, we're not trying to come into your realm. Like, we actually don't care about that. Us princes, we don't want that. And Bryce and Hunt don't fully believe that, but they're like, okay. And so then he kind of explains, he's like, there's other worlds, right? Like, other people could be trying to come into your world. And then he's like, outside of the Malakim, who are created on Midgard, like all of you other Vanir, you came from other worlds, and believe it or not, hell is actually another world. It's physically another planet, and we don't really want your sunshiny planet, thank you very much. So not us trying to come in and sending this Crystallos after this horn. So then they're again back to square one, and he also mentions some things from his first visit where he's like, what blinds an oracle? And Bryce responds with, what kind of cat visits an oracle? And then he tells her right before he disappears, he's like, hey, Bryce, make the drop, and after you make the drop, then come find me. He also tells Bryce to run the tests again and to look for the in-between, and then he leaves. So then Hunt is like, what the F was that? How on earth have you talked to him before? Like, what do you mean you've met a prince of hell? All this stuff. And she kind of brushes aside for a moment, and so she calls Declan and asks what kind of tests were run and if more tests could be done on like old clothes or evidence from Danica and the pack. And he's like, oh yeah, there's like some preliminary tests that they run, but then there's one that's called Mimir. That one was not run, and that one's primarily Phaetek. And then Rune in the background was like, yeah, the Autumn King explicitly said not to do that. So then she starts seeing red, and she is pissed that, of course, the Autumn King denied running this test that probably could have helped figuring out how Danica died. So then she just immediately gets in a rage and starts running all the way from her apartment to Phiro to the gates of the Autumn King, blasting at the gate and like, let me in, let me talk to him. The guards are like sneering at her and they're like, go away, trash. You don't have an appointment, so we're not gonna let you in. Rune shows up and he's like, hey, stand down. They were like, we don't take orders from you, bud. Sorry, even if you're a prince, like we don't take orders from you. And things are getting heated, and then Bryce says some things to Rune. She's just in a bad mood, so she's just having a bad day. She ends up leaving. But instead of going home, she ends up going right to one of the bars that she used to frequent, and she immediately starts drinking whiskey. Not water. She breaks her rule of no alcohol for the last 2 years and just starts throwing back shots. And then Hunt's like, okay, I mean, it's your rule to break, so like, I'm not gonna be mad at you for drinking if that's what you want to do, but I might be drinking water. And then she says some mean things to him about like Shahar and whatever and some that. And then he's like, okay, I'll see you at home. So then he leads her to her brooding. She later shows up like 2 hours later and ends up bringing groceries and makes him an apology meal. And as she's like cooking, she admits to the story of how she met Adis when she was 13, when she was crying on a bench outside of the Oracle after her father had left, and the Oracle visit was horrible, and he showed up as a cat, and he was just like, what blinds an Oracle? And she had responded with, what kind of cat sees the Oracle? And she could tell that he wasn't a shifter, but he also was not a normal cat. Like, he was something, she could tell something was off and different about him. And so then he was like, the Oracle may not have seen, but I saw. And so he had told her also to not cry and not let those who hurt her or whatever like see that power they had over her. And that was kind of the whole little interaction she had with Adis when she was 13. She also talks about how she might not go make the drop because her anchor was supposed to be Danica, and she doesn't want like using one of the government ones, provided ones, not for her. Even though Hunt's like, I mean, I did that and it was fine. She's like, that's just not for me. Juniper's too busy, so she's like, yeah, I don't really want Juniper to be my anchor. Fury doesn't talk to me, so that's a no, and like, I don't have anybody. So I might not do it. He's like, okay, well, you should still do it, but whatever, your choice. He then also admits that he still agrees. This is how their conversation went. During that conversation, he admits that he still agrees with what Shahar, her cause, like what she stood for, and if he had to do it all over again, knowing what he knows now, he would still join her forces and still fight for that freedom, even knowing everything that it cost. So then they get the Mimir test done on Danica's clothes, and Bryce even finds some old clothes of Danica's that she had stored in a storage unit just in case the evidence ones, or who knows, tampered or something, and they give it to Victoria to run the tests. And then Micah calls Hunt, demanding an audience. So Micah is pissed that they're running tests on old evidence and that this case isn't solved. The summit is in 2 weeks, and he's like getting on Hunt's case. He also is like, Sandriel keeps trying to give me offers about buying you back and whatever. Like, don't make me enticed to take her up on that. And so then he gives him another mission, and he says no guns on this mission. So then Hunt starts descending into Umbra Mortis. Not a great headspace type deal. Like, gotta do this horrible assassin thing. Puts on his battle clothes and his helmet. Bryce is like texting him like, hey, I'm gonna order some dumplings for lunch, you want any? And he just responds, I'm good, thanks. Whatever. She's like, and he can see that the bubble comes up like 20 million times. And then she just says, okay. And this is like 11 a.m. in the morning or something. And then he leaves and he turns his phone off so he can't get any more messages from Bryce. She continues work, but is super worried because she hears nothing back from him. And then it's after lunch and nothing. And then she's closing for work and nothing. And then it's 8 p.m. and nothing. And so she's like worried because she's like, I mean, like, I know what Hunt does, but also I'm just worried because I haven't heard anything back. Like, he could be a pile of ash for all I know. So then 11 p.m. rolls around and she ends up calling Rune. And she's like, have you maybe heard anything, seen anything about Hunt? I haven't heard about him. And then Rune's like, are you okay? Is everything fine? And then right then Hunt walks in. She's like, oh, he's back. Never mind. Blah, blah, blah. Hangs up. He is not in a good mood. He's splattered in blood. And like from the scent of it, multiple different people's blood. And then he just walks straight past Bryce into the room, the guest room, and then shuts the door and then starts the shower. And she's like super worried because she's like, holy crap, like this is a Hunt I don't know. That is the Umbra Mortis, like holy frick. So then Hunt had, the reason he'd shown up is he thought Bryce would be asleep by now, so he thought it'd be fine. He'd just show up and shower, and then unfortunately she'd been waiting for him, so then he has a lot of self-loathing happening. He ends up doing his normal ritual of turning the shower onto the hottest possible setting of like scalding, burning, boiling hot, and then sitting in the shower and letting it burn him. And then his veneerness heals him as he's continuously being burned, and it's like this vicious cycle. So he's just sitting in the shower as this happens. Bryce sitting out on the couch. 20 minutes go by. Shower's still going. 30 minutes. 45. An hour goes by. Shower's still running. So she kind of like peeks in and is like, Hunt, are you okay? Everything good in here? Obviously not. The entire room is super muggy, and so she like peeks in, and in the bathroom mirror she doesn't see anything in the shower, so she's like, oh my gosh, what if something happened? And then she sees his wing like kind of rustle, and she's like, oh, he's sitting on the floor. She ends up going to him in the shower, seeing him there, and she's like, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna wash you off and help you, because he's just like staring at nothing, clearly looking horrible. She even says to him, she's like, you look how I feel on the inside most days. He is fully dissociating though, so she can't tell if anything's getting in or not. So she takes her lavender soap, peep thrown a glass reference there, cruel of SJM to use lavender soap again. Takes her lavender soap and is like, I'm gonna wash you if that's okay. He like barely gives a nod, so she starts washing him down, top half, and then she's like, I can't really wash your wings if you're sitting against the wall. So then he stands up and she's like averting her eyes because she's like, this is not the time for that. And then he turns around and she carefully washes his wings, scrubs them all down, and then she turns the shower off and she gets him all dried off and dries his wings for him. She helps him get dressed, putting some underwear on, and then she's like also soaked in her own clothing, so she's about to leave, and then he just grabs her wrist and like basically telling her to stay without verbally using words because he's not mentally there yet. So she's like, okay, sure, I'll stay. So she grabs one of his shirts, which she hadn't put on him because it has like weird flaps on the back for his wings, and she didn't really know how to work with that, so she was like, you can just sleep in your underwear, that's fine. So she's like, you know what, I'll sleep in your shirt because I feel like if I leave you, who knows what will happen in the 2 seconds that I leave and change and come back. So she throws her wet clothes in the bathroom, puts on his shirt, and it's long enough that it covers everything important. She sits against the headboard, and then he just immediately comes, lays his head on her lap, and she's like stroking his hair. She ends up falling asleep like that. He wakes up, 3 a.m. Head is much clearer than it like normally would be in this circumstance, and then he sees that Bryce fell asleep there, and he's like, oh my gosh, no one's cared for me like this in so long. And so then he carries her back to her bed and puts her to sleep there. Well, she's already asleep. He just like tucks her in and goes back to his bed. He also looks at her phone, which was buzzing on the counter, and sees that Rune had like texted her and was like, the doorman said that you're both up in the apartment, so I'm assuming everything's fine, call me in the morning. And then he's like, thank you for reaching out to me, like I'm always here for you, Bryce, like, you know, trying to reestablish a better connection between us. And then Hunt is even more touched because she like called her cousin. The next morning, they're in the kitchen making breakfast and coffee, whatever. Sexual tension is brewing, but then Bryce is like letting these mental thoughts of like, she doesn't like to let anybody in and have the power to hurt you because that's exactly what they're gonna do inevitably. So she's like, this is dangerous. Nope, can't do this because your girl needs therapy. So she ends up getting dressed and going to work and stopping anything from progressing past just some dirty thoughts. When Bryce gets to work, Jezebel immediately is like, open the back door. So she goes to open the back door, And what does she see? But Jezebel has acquired a new occupant for the 100,000-gallon tank she has on one of the back walls in like the little basement library area. And it is a knock. N-O-K-K. Basically, this knock, it's like an anti-mer, so it's got like, it's humanoid in appearance, but like mostly really needly teeth and like four-fingered claws, and it's like got a translucent tail, and it just like looks pure evil, and it's horrible, and it's scaring Lahaba. Honestly, it would scare anybody if they saw that. Their favorite pastime is drowning swimming victims, so you know, a fun guy. The only pro is that any exposure to air and they immediately start like dying, so he will stay on the water because air will literally kill him. But even so, Bryce still makes sure to like, there's like this feeding mechanism door thing. There's like stairs up to the side of the case to the top, and you can put something on it, and there's like some controls you hit, and I'm assuming it like descends into the water or whatever. She makes sure that that trap door, even though there's like this much air at the top, and that would theoretically still hurt or kill the knock, she's like making sure this is locked like triple times because he's really creepy. And she even tries to call Jezebel and say, you need to get rid of this ASAP, it's like scaring Lahaba. But Jezebel's just like, no. So he's their new roommate, Lahaba's new roommate anyway, because Lahaba sleeps there. She's absolutely terrified because it just scratches the glass and stares, and it has like this evil smile. It's nasty. I kind of picture it a little bit like what the mermaids look like, or kelpies. Honestly, they're all creepy. In the fourth Harry Potter, when they're in the lake. Anyway, nasty looking things. Next, they meet up with Victoria, who says that the initial results of the Mimir test on Danica's and Maximus's clothing shows that they were exposed to synth, which is this new healing drug that's like on the market. And so she's still gonna test all the rest of the victims and clothes and whatever, but like it's all over the clothes, so clearly they were exposed to it somehow. So then Bryce is like, well, maybe because she did like part-time work at Redner Industries, which was her ex-boyfriend Reed from the very beginning of the book. That's his family, Reed Redner. That's how they're rich AF. Anyway, so she's gonna keep doing tests and, you know, look into that. So Bryce calls up Rune and is like, hey, your med witch friend, that research she sent you, was that like on synth? And he's like, yeah, it is. The drug's called synth, and it's like heavily redacted by Redner Industries, but you know, it's looking like there's a lot of crazy stuff happening. He's like, what I can see of the ingredients that's not redacted is there's obsidian salt in it. So then Bryce is like, is there enough he could summon like a demon? He's like, well, I'm not sure, but I'll keep digging. Like, I don't know how concentrated it is or how much the dosage is, but like, you know, I'll look. So now she's still thinking, lots of things pondering in her brain. Her mom calls her, continuously trying to come visit the city or get Bryce to visit home, whatever. So she ends up consenting to a video chat. So that night at 7, she's gonna do a web chat, and they do unfortunately want to meet Hunt because she had said, she's like, no, I have a roommate, and they're like, what's his name, whatever, all this stuff, and she's like, Athy, like, no, you can't do all this stuff, blah blah, because her mom's very pushy. And so she's like, you can meet him on the web chat. So anyway, scheduled the web chat. 7 o'clock rolls around, web chat happens. Bryce is about to, she's trying to like bail on it and go search for synth leads or whatever, and Hunt's like, hey, take this moment to appreciate that you have 2 parents that are alive and they love you, and like just take the time to talk with them. So she's like, okay, fine, like, you're right, sure. Web chat happens. Everything's going pretty good because I mean, they recognize the Umbra Mortis when you see the tattoo and his other tattoo, but they're being pretty civil and nice. Ember Quinlan's fiery. She's basically Bryce, but with black hair and older, and they're having a pretty good time for the most part, until Bryce then is like, hey, have you ever like gotten her leg checked out? And they were like, what are you talking about? And then Bryce is like, it's fine, nothing, because she'd been like rubbing her leg where the wound was from where the Crystallos 2 years ago attacked her. And he's like, yeah, she like rubs it all the time, bothers her, all this stuff, and he totally throws her under the bus for that. And then before she can like hit him, whatever, gets up and like goes to get a glass of water, and he's just like smiling all smug because she's been neglecting to take care of herself, and she has never seen a med witch about it. And then her parents are like kind of worried about her, and even Randall's like, she's like, it's fine, it's, you know, It only bothers me occasionally, whatever. And Randall's like, stand on balance on that leg and then tell me that it's fine. And she doesn't do it. And so all this stuff is happening. And then her mom is like, I'm gonna schedule an appointment in the morning and you have to go. And she's like, we'll see. And she's like, no, you better go. And then they end up hanging up. And then and then her mom calls her 2 minutes later on her phone and is like warning her against all veneer males, whatever, because she's like, whatever's going on with Hunt. She's like, there's nothing going on with Hunt. She's like, I just had a bad experience, and I just want you to be careful. And she's like, I know, it's fine. And she's like, okay, don't forget to go to the appointment. I'll text you the details. She still doesn't think she's gonna go to this appointment because she's like, that's dumb. I don't want to. Also, before her mom hung up, she was like, Danica wouldn't want you to be in pain. Like, don't just stay in this pain just for Danica, whatever. And Bryce is like pissed because that's exactly what she's been doing. She keeps the pain because it's a reminder of Danica and everything. And when Hunt comes back into the room after the phone call ended, and she's like, you're a freaking traitor, Athalar. She also admits that she kept it because she wants the reminder of the pain, and he also is like, hey, like, I don't think she'd want you to live in pain. So then the next day, Bryce and Hunt, they go to the meat market and they start asking about synth, and they're trying to go ask all these vendors to see if they sell it or they will sell it or know where to find it ever. And everyone's like, no, we don't know what we're talking about. No, we won't accept Bryce because we really don't know anything. Until they get to like this kid who's like working the stall for her mom, and Bryce is like, yo, you know where I could find something really fun? And then the kid's like, we have a cool group chain. I know that you've been approaching everybody. And the Vipe says, like, we don't sell that kind of crap here. And, like, you gotta quit asking about it because it's some nasty crap. We don't deal with that. And then the Vipe also says to check the river. So they're like, okay, cool. Thanks for that. Glad we know that everyone's been talking about us. Anyway, so then they meet Therian over on the dock near the meat market, and he says that Danica was spotted on a barge the day before she died, and it looks like she was doing a deal. So that would explain why, if she'd been confiscating synth, then that would explain why her clothes would have been like exposed to it. So then Bryce is trying to explain, or like trying to figure out a lot of other stuff on why other people would have it, and Therian also explains that the synth gives humans like strength that's greater than a veneer's strength for a short period of time. And that's all they know about this synth stuff so far. So then Bryce tries to call Fury just to see if maybe she'll answer. Then she surprisingly answers for the first time in 2 years. And so she's like, Fury, did Danica ever mention synth to you? Because she never mentioned it to me. And Fury's like, what are you talking about, synth? Like, stay away from that. That crap's crap. That crap's horrible. And she's like, so she did mention it to you? And she's like, she might have. Yeah. She's like, I mentioned it to you the night she died because someone offered it to you to buy. And I said, no, don't take that crap because it's bad. And then Bryce is like, how come she never mentioned it to me? And she's like, Danica's number one rule was always protecting you, even from yourself. And if she had told you or mentioned about some kind of new drug and even told you not to do it, like, we literally have seen you take everything. So we were trying to protect you so that you wouldn't be tempted to take it. And she's like, why would I take it? And they're like, Fury's like, girl, we literally have seen you take every kind of drug. So if you didn't know it existed, the better. So Bryce is all but hurt, and then Fury's talking about how she is demanded to go to the summit, so she'll be there in a couple weeks, so they'll hang out, and Bryce is like, sure, whatever. Fine, because she's still mad at Fury, obviously, for not talking to her for 2 years and not even really apologizing or giving an explanation. So then Bryce calls Rune, and she asks if that med witch knew where the synth came from, and he says that she's not really focusing on where it came from, but she's trying to find like an antidote because she took that venom, the Crystallis venom, from Hunt from the attack the other night, and is using her magic in that venom to try to create this antidote to like negate the effects of synth. But she needs more venom, so if they happen to find other Crystallos, he's like, let me know so I can get some venom for her, because she's actually been really helpful, so, and I'd just like to repay the favor. Then the next day hits, and Bryce is like, of course, today of all days would be the day that I get my cycle. Because she's half Fae, Fae get like their cycle once a year or something, and humans have once a month, so she landed somewhere in the middle and gets it every 3 months. And so she's like, today, it's gonna suck. And so she's just having a bad day. And even Lahaba's like, you're extra mean today. She's like, I'm sorry. Just not having a good day. She doesn't even let Hunt into the into Griffin Antiquities at all. And then after her work, she ends up buying herself some chocolate croissants, and she walks to the river and sits on a bench. And then Hunt finally like lands and sits by her and is like, you know, what's going on? She's like, today's Danica's birthday. And I thought that maybe Juniper, Fury, my parents, somebody would like just reach out or something and say like, I miss her too, something really cliche, just anything. But it seems like everybody forgot except for me, and they all expect me to move on. But how can I move on? How am I supposed to move on? I can't, when that was like the best part of my life, the bright light of my life. My life has been so dark, it's been hard. And he's like, actually, like, I get that. It took me, he's like, this probably won't help you, but it took me 50 years to even be like somewhat over Shahar, just to be okay, or like accept that it actually happened, really. Not really okay, but just accept that it she was gone for sure. And then Bryce explains that Danica always wanted chocolate croissants on her birthday. And so she goes to open the box and then immediately shuts it. Hunt's like, what? And she's like, no, it's fine. It doesn't matter. And he's like, no. Grabs the box, opens it, sees that someone had taken icing and written trash right on the top. And he knows that there's one person who specifically called her that within the last few weeks. And he's like, absolutely not. So he takes it and she's like, no, don't give the satisfaction, don't do it. And he just flies off. He shows up at a bar, and who's at this bar but Amelie Ravenscroft and some of her pack members, and he's in a full rage, lightning rage, blasts through the bar, pins her to the wall, and is like, stay the F away from her, don't ever come near her, whatever. She's all like pinned and whimpering on the wall like a freaking little pansy. And this is all in a public bar, and he does not give an F. So there's literally cameras and people's phone cameras everywhere, and he's just like, stay away. And then Ethan shows up and he's like, what did you do, Amelie? And then she's like trying to talk but kind of pinned to the wall, so she's like, ugh. And then Hunt is like, don't pretend you're innocent, whatever. And then Ethan like sees the box, opens it, like makes the connection, and it like looks like it dawns on him, and he's like, oh my gosh, like I didn't have a part of this. And Hunt's just like, all of you suck. And then he leaves and he goes back to the apartment. And then Bryce is like, you didn't kill her, did you? And then she's like looking really scared, and he's like, I mean, I know I have a reputation, but like, geez, until he realizes she's not scared of him, she's scared for him and like the consequences of what he just did. And he's like, no, she's alive, but I delivered a message, whatever. And so she's like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. That was stupid. That was an idiotic move. And he's like, I don't care. We're friends, you know? And she's like, okay, well, guess we can't change what has already happened.